Hello and welcome. This is a course that is designed to help you build a better course for the Performative Academy. My name is Blair Cook, and I'm a professional accountant, many-time CFO, and many-time corporate director. However, I also have decades of experience in designing and delivering e-learning courses. I started out by developing courses for the Big Four firms. More recently, I've been engaged by the profession to help design their programs. But like you, I've always wanted and preferred to develop my own content. And I've got a couple of dozen courses that I've developed for the Academy. And that's not to say that I'm an expert by any stretch, but I've learned a few things along the way, and I'm hoping to share those with you today to accelerate your own learning curve. Now, we've all experienced sitting through dry, boring presentations. And while the deck is stacked against us in finance from the outset, I believe this is not an excuse for succumbing to this tendency. Let's look at a recent study that asked participants to identify what annoys them the most with some PowerPoint presentations. 72% of respondents identified that they were annoyed when speakers read each of their slides aloud. 51% of respondents got annoyed when the text was too small to read. And 48% it was when full sentences instead of bullet points were used on the slides. 30% identified overly complex diagrams, and 26% were annoyed by the speaker's poor choice of color. Think of this as a list of what not to do in today's course. And I'm going to give you some ideas of what to do instead. Here's a preview of what I want to cover. I want to give you some ideas on ways you can enhance the stickiness of your content with your learners. Next, let's talk about a few ways to make your presentation more visual. And finally, let's discuss the delivery. In these courses, you've only got your voice and your slides to convey your content. So I'm hoping by sharing a few of these little insights, you'll deliver courses that will both attract an audience and deliver meaningful content to improve their career. So those 4 slides I just showed you are what might be used as what I'll refer to as a promotional video. A promo video is intended to be short, 2 to 5 minutes in length, that introduces your course to prospective learners. 2 to 5 minutes is not much time, so you get probably a page or less a copy to use to cover the following 5 points. First, give your course a purpose. Remember that you're offering a new skill set to someone, so entice them to enroll by defining what that skill set is and how it will benefit them in the workplace. Then, take a few sentences to establish your own credibility with the topic matter. This will answer for the student why they should select you to teach them this particular skill set. Next, discuss the topic, but very briefly. This will help a potential student understand whether they would benefit from the training you are offering. It's a good idea to give a high-level, very quick overview of what will be covered in the course. And finish with a call to action. Ideally, you want them to enroll, but to persuade them, you will need to focus on how this course will benefit them the most. So with those comments out of the way, let's begin my first lesson. And typically I do so by thanking my students for enrolling in this course. I then tend to set up each lesson with a brief introduction, a middle part, and an end, so that each lesson kind of hangs together on one specific subcomponent of my overall topic. In this lesson, we're going to focus on how you convey your content. The first principle of developing a course is to focus on your audience. Making a course is not about you, believe it or not. It's about your audience and their needs. The more your course meets their needs, the more effective your course will be, and your audience will help you spread the word. So first and foremost, you have a specific audience in mind. Is this a beginner course with no prior knowledge or experience necessary? Or instead, do the students require some prerequisite level of understanding to get the most out of this particular topic? Second, make sure that you have an outcome in mind of what you would like your student to do after taking your course. A couple of rules of thumb to bear in mind. The average speaking speed is somewhere between 150 and 180 words a minute. So, if we are targeting a course that is an hour in length, we should be looking for a script, if you were to prepare one, that would be approximately 9,000 to 10,000 words in length. Just on this matter of scripting, we certainly don't want to make it seem like we are reading when we present our slides. But scripting is the easiest way to control content delivery. So it's the place I start with first with every course I develop. After developing an outline, I literally create a script in a Word document. Now, an hour-long course is hard on the head. In fact, after about 5 minutes of listening, students will begin facing what is called cognitive backlog, which is to say that the brain starts having trouble digesting all the information being thrown at it. So ideally, we will want to take your topic and chunk it up into separate segments that last from 3 to 10 minutes each. By doing so, you are vastly improving the student's ability to retain your content. A related idea to chunking content is to remember the rule of threes. Have you ever noticed in life how things naturally occur in patterns of 3? Consider the ABCs, the 3 R's, the 3 pigs, the 3 mice, the 3 bears, the 3 wise men, the 3 pillars. You get the idea. There's actually a scientific reason for this as well. It turns out that the brain is conditioned to remember just 3 things, or 3 chunks in short-term working memory, after which retention falls off considerably. So, how do we incorporate this into our course? Well, first of all, you should be thinking about no more than 3 key messages for each of your lessons. If you have more than 3 key messages, perhaps start a new lesson, or you risk lessening student retention. Let's put this rule of threes into practice, and I'm going to show you how I've applied it to today's course. I've got 3 lessons, each with 3 sub-themes. So for instance, in this lesson, I've talked about the rule of threes, and I'm about to move on to 2 more important points to make about writing your script pertaining to the language you use and engaging your student. This little diagram here is referred to as a message map. And all of my courses get planned out using a message map or a mind map or sometimes a detailed outline. Planning in course developments pays dividends the further you get along in the process. Next, let's talk about the language you use. When we script the conversation, we risk losing that conversational tone. So as you're writing down what you will say, pretend that you're presenting to an audience. Use language and a cadence that you would use with them. In fact, make your language very personal. Avoid talking about your topic generically and instead make your comments specific to your audience. And along these lines, I encourage you to use a lot of action-oriented verbs throughout your presentations, in the headers, in the bullet points, and in the script. You'll notice as we go along that I've avoided using nouns to start many of my discussions because I want you to act upon these ideas and incorporate them into your own courses. The no jargon, no acronyms, and no fancy words should go without saying, particularly when you're doing a beginner's course on a topic. The truth is, the more fancy language you're using, the more boring your presentation is going to be. The more boring it is, the less anyone will remember of your presentation and the less apt they are to recommend your course to others. Finally, I always find that shorter sentences are better. However, sometimes a long run-on sentence can help you make a point. Mostly, we want a script that is interesting to listen to. And if you can slip in a few personal stories, some examples, or some light humor, that helps too. Now recognize that having a student listen to you present for an hour is one of the least effective ways to learn a topic. This is what is known as passive learning. We can greatly amplify the outcome of your course when you incorporate audience participation in the learning process. And I'm not talking about the knowledge checks or the multiple choice exams. The reason student engagement is so important is that it really comes down to science and brain activity. Eric Mazur at Harvard University strapped up a few students to a Brave Wave monitor and followed them around campus for a few days. Notice the amount of brain wave activity going on during a typical class, where the student is sitting and listening to a professor. It's basically about the same as watching TV. However, notice the brainwave activity during the lab sessions and the homework periods. When the students are engaged in the learning, it becomes much more effective. Videos alone and by themselves are less effective. So let's talk about 3 ways you can amplify your audience engagement within the format of our 60-minute course content presentation. Here's an easy one to script. Simply ask a student a question and pause. Let the student consider the answer. It could be to test understanding of a core concept or to have them answer a simple problem. If they require a few minutes to consider an answer, simply instruct the students to pause the video and allow them to consider an answer. After you've allowed for ample time for the student to formulate a response, answer the question yourself. Here's another idea for upping the engagement, and that is to develop a workbook to accompany your course. And in it, you might have slides to your presentation so the students can take notes. You may have a few sample exercises. I have a course on financial modeling where at the beginning of each lesson, the student is provided with a start file in Excel. And then throughout the lesson, we build a financial model together. At the end of the lesson, I have provided them with a solution file. Now, not all students will use these materials, but of those who do, their level of skills development will be far superior to those who only listen to the video. And then finally, another useful way to up the engagement factor is to give the students a tool of some sort, so that they can take this tool away from the course and use it in the workplace. It might be a checklist, a form, or a guide that they may be directed to or referred to throughout the course. This is like bonus material, and everyone loves getting free bonuses for enrolling in a course. So in this lesson, we talked about developing your script, remembering to chunk up your content, and remembering to keep your language simple, and don't forget to engage your student in participating in their own learning. Their skills development will be multiple times higher when you follow these practices. Let's move on to lesson 2. Again, a quick review and preview of the lesson is a good place to start. So in the last lesson, we talked about what we were going to say. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the visual side of the equation. That is, what do you show on the screen? A common question is, how many slides should I have? And you'll hear all sorts of advice on this, but my opinion can be summarized into 3 guiding principles. Principle number 1 is that there's no prescribed number of slides when you are creating visual aids for a presentation. My performative course on PowerPoint actually has 184 slides for a 1-hour course, which is somewhat of an outliner and intentional to prove just this point. Most of my hour-long courses have between 60 and 90 slides. I'm not a big fan of having a static screen for longer than a few seconds. Principle number 2, no more than 1 idea per slide. And ideally, the ideas really shouldn't spill over multiple slides. Slides are free to create, so there's no reason to be inefficient. Big, beautiful slides are 100 times better than busy, squishy slides. Principle number 3, the script guides this decision more so than anything else, as I'm going to show you in a moment. Remember that script that we talked about in the first lesson? Yeah, I know half of you ignored me because you're all gifted presenters, or perhaps rationalize who has time for that. Let me see if I can predict what your slides might look like. Okay, so this might be a slight exaggeration, but not that much from some of the presentations I've seen. Let's start with recognizing that that's a lot of text on one slide. Even now, you're reading this slide and only half listening to what I'm saying. It's physically impossible for the brain to multitask. It can either read the slide or listen to me. It can't do both well. So let's see if you can identify what's wrong with this slide. Now, notice how I'm getting you, the student, to engage in this course by simply asking you a question and then pausing for a moment before I move on. Sprinkling a few of these in every few minutes keeps the learner more alert because they never know when you're going to ask them the next question. So, the answer being, just about everything on this slide. Notice how the headers is using nouns and not verbs. The bullets themselves are too long and contain too much gibberish. Do we really need the logo on every single slide? What value does that add? Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. The marketing people said you had to do it, so sorry. The copyright and the page numbers, do these really add any value, or are they just one more little distraction away from your core message? Let me show you how I think about developing my PowerPoint slides. Once you have the script, you can literally take each paragraph or group of related paragraphs and copy them into the speaker notes section for each PowerPoint slide. Then consider the sorts of visual aid that might support the content that I'm presenting. A visual aid might well be a list of bullets, such as those that I use to start this lesson, the 3 principles that dictate how many slides should be in your PowerPoint. A visual aid might be something like this. How does this feel versus my previous screen with all that dense text? Basically, I was trying to convey the same sort of message about the virtues of e-learning. But now my content is far more concise. It's more jazzy. It's got some interest to it. It's not nearly as distracting as all that text across the screen. And I have a nice picture that helps the students weigh the benefits of classroom learning against e-learning. Notice that when you use slide headers, they should grab students' attention. Much like a newspaper or an online news site uses headers to grab readers' attentions and pull them in and encourage them to click. Now the student wants to learn more. You've piqued their curiosity. The text on the screen supports the content and the points that I'm trying to make about why e-learning is more effective than classroom training. When we incorporate imagery into our content, the result is that more of our brain gets engaged in the learning experience. This is what is called the multimedia principle. The multimedia principle suggests that when ideas are presented in both words and pictures, different parts of our brains will process the images from the words. And when you stimulate more of the brain, more of the message hopefully sinks in and gets retained. Now, just about any message you have can be converted into a visual. Ideas and information can be reinforced by images, numbers can be reinforced by graphs, and historical events can be converted to timelines. Let's wrap up this lesson by showing how we use PowerPoint as a visual aid it was intended to be, and not as the teleprompter that is defaulted to. I like imagery, but imagery is really tricky to get right. So here's my 2-minute crash course on selecting images, which you can find through various online sources. First, the quality of the image is extremely important. It should be clear, crisp, and professional looking. Generally speaking, avoid clip art for the simple reason that it's nearly impossible to find a matching set of clip art that you can use throughout your presentation. Stock photography is great and readily available. This eliminates that whole matching issue. Drawings too can be great, assuming that you can replicate the same look and feel throughout your presentation, even if you're using stickmen. However, make sure that your stock photography nicely blends with your background, which is why I prefer using a plain white canvas for my slides. Make sure that the images you select reinforce your key message and that you're not just picking images for the sake of color. A common problem I have is I find a nice stock image like this one, but it doesn't blend well with the background. A photograph just plopped onto a slide like this doesn't give that professional feel. So there's a couple of ways you can deal with this, and the easiest one is to just simply put a frame around the picture using the PowerPoint tools. Does this look better? Perhaps a little more professional? The other idea when you have a picture like this is to use the picture and stretch it so that it covers the entire screen. I'll let you be the judge as to what you think looks the best. Tip number 2 is to ensure that a minimum font size of 30 is used for all text in your presentation. Now, generally speaking, for the bullets used in your presentation, this is relatively easy to accomplish. But what about all those diagrams and charts that we put into our presentations? Very often, the text gets very small very fast. And finally, if you have complex diagrams, consider having the diagrams build using some of the animation features in PowerPoint. This allows you to hold your audience's hand and give them kind of a guided tour of your message. However, avoid distracting animations where the text or the graphics swirl and spin as they come onto the screen. Most times you'll find that a simple appear animation will work just fine. And let's take what we've learned in this lesson on making it visual and create a graphic that helps us remember the elements of e-learning excellence. We talked about the planning and scripting in our first lesson. We need to elevate our students' level of engagement. And in this lesson, we talked about using PowerPoint as a visual aid to amplify our message. And in the next lesson, we're going to talk about enhancing your delivery. You are literally moments away from knowing as much as I do about e-learning. This is it, the final lesson in our mini course. Time now to record our presentation. Proformative has provided each of you with screencasting software and a headset. The software will literally record whatever you have on your screen at the time. And the headset is absolutely crucial for getting crystal clear audio quality. Once you've got those loaded, let me show you how I record my desktop. To begin with, I have my laptop connected to a monitor. I set the screencasting software to record the monitor. Then I use Presenter View in PowerPoint to have my script and the slides presented as such on my laptop. I'm not going to walk you through about how I use a webcam in my courses, but if you've ever wondered how I do all my courses with my little webcam in the corner, this is the setup I use. Now, note that you can adjust the margins so that all your speaker notes fit on the screen without the need for scrolling. You can also adjust the font size to help those of us with eyesight that isn't quite what it used to be. Now, you have no need to look at your monitor. Just start presenting your topic using your speaker notes as your guide. Now, the tone you use in large part conveys your enthusiasm for the topic. And since you are the expert, you had better convey a tone that encourages a learner to pay attention. Recognizing that many of us in finance are not regular TED Talk speakers, for me this means amplifying my personality. Students would much rather spend an hour listening to someone who is jazzed, or at least pretending to be jazzed about the topic, than someone who is droning a script. And generally, you will try to talk more slowly and enunciate each word more clearly than you would normally when you talk. This allows your brain to stay ahead of your mouth to avoid getting all tongue twisted. However, if you do make a mistake, the easiest thing to do is to wait a few seconds, take a deep breath, and then start that sentence again. Video editing later on can make the removal of your flub-ups easy to do. And don't forget to consider the powerful effect of a silent pause now and then. This is particularly important when you've just spoken a point that you want the audience to consider for a moment longer. That second or two delay forces the audience to think about what you last said and make it feel that much more important. One of the hardest things I've found to do over the years is to wrap up my presentations. So many presentations that I've been to are just kind of cruising along, and then they just suddenly stop. To a student, this feels more like a dead cat bounce. Instead, I'd rather have the learner feel the ending.
And that's why I stand here as confident as I have ever been that the state of our union is strong. Thank you. God bless the United States.
Listen, if Obama can drop the mic after his State of the Union address, you can too, at least well in spirit. What I really want you to do is to challenge the student to take away what they've learned and do something with it. Deliver on the promise you've made 60 minutes ago that you would improve their career. Let's see if I can do that for you now. E-learning has been around for the better part of a couple of decades now, but it's only in the last few years that developing it has become accessible to non-technical experts like you and me. We now have the opportunity to participate in a $107 billion global market that's expected to grow to $450 billion in the next 5 years. Now that's an industry I want to invest my time and expertise into. Today, 30% of corporate training is delivered using e-learning. However, that value proposition of e-learning is compelling. Companies save between 50 and 70% by replacing instructor-led learning with e-learning. But hold on a minute, you might say, which is more effective? I like this statistic that even surprised me, that e-learning results in 350% higher content retention by the student versus an instructor-led training session. And because e-learning is self-paced and always available, it cuts the training time in half. So, my call to action to you as an instructor is to share your passion with the next generation of financial professionals. Raise your own professional profile by creating interesting and engaging courses that exemplify your credibility in the field. And finally, participate in earning a passive stream of income by building a course once and sharing it potentially with millions of students. This was a quick, but I expect perhaps rather intensive presentation of some e-learning development practices. And I'm sure there's other questions that people have. So feel free to contact me for more information.